Hello, so a couple years ago I talked about how to graft Bradford pears, how to top work them and then bark graft them. But something that I did not talk about is how to keep those branches that grow incredibly fast, those scions, that grafted wood, how to keep that from getting too big and then shearing off in the wind. So let me show you how to reinforce those scions. Come join me in the chaos.
Come join me in the chaos where the food forest thrives in the joy of growing. Our hearts come alive, embracing the mess where nature takes control. Come join me in the chaos. Let the bounty on.
All right, so if you have Bradford pears, you probably know they don't produce useful fruit and they're not very useful. But I found that you can actually use the rootstock to grow good pears. And so I had some scions on this one, and as you notice, they're not there now. And the reason why is because they grew so big and so fast that on a windy day, they just sheared off. So this one is still on, but you'll notice there's a little hole right here. And you can't really see it anymore, but what I did about a year ago is I put a screw through that scion to hold it to the tree to reinforce it. You can do the same thing with nails, but I like screws because they have a little bit more surface area for gripping to the trunk. So that's what the scion looks like now. For reference, I don't know, I can put my watch up there. It's pretty big. I would say that's maybe 5 inches wide or so. And that's only like a year and a half old. So it's like catching up very rapidly to the size of the trunk. And so it's basically like a tree sticking out of a tree. And so I've been pruning it pretty hard, which is also very important. But you're also going to want to reinforce that or the whole thing will just shear off. Basically, there's like a little veneer of wood. So if you imagine like a tree puts on a ring every year and think about how thin those tree rings are, that's all that's holding it to the trunk. And so very easily that can just tear off. So let me show you on this one. This one's actually an apple tree. It was a crab apple that I did the same thing to, but it's a pretty good object lesson if you look here. So you can see this void. There was a scion here, and all that was holding it on was just that little thin veneer of wood, and then the whole thing just sheared off as well. So this was the last time it happened, and I kind of lost my temper, and I'm like, fine, I'm just gonna put a screw through them. I don't know if this is gonna kill it, but I'm just gonna do it and see if it works. And then sure enough, it's held them on really well. So again, this one's an apple, but it's the same idea. You can top work any tree. It doesn't matter. Your trees get too big, you can literally cut them down to stumps and just graft onto them and start them over so that the fruit is closer to the ground so you don't have to get up on a ladder. So this one, like I said, is the pear. And I'm gonna actually show you how I do this in case you're curious, how I put a screw through my scions to reinforce them. So for reference, this is kind of what they look like at different stages of growth. So this is after a few months. I think I did this one like a month before that one. So the wood will grow over it eventually. Something that slows down how quickly it grows over the screw is whether or not it tears or rips. So this early one, I didn't drill a pilot hole. I just put the screw through it. And so that has caused some damage. You can see that it's tearing a little bit, it's splitting here. So that could cause an issue. All right, so I like these longer screws. I believe these are 4 inches, 3 to 4 inches. And they have some type of an inert coating on them. You don't have to worry about it rusting inside the tree trunk. And then you're gonna want a pilot drill bit. So a drill bit that's basically the diameter of the shaft. So if you look at the part where there's no screw threads, you want a drill bit that's basically the exact same size as that, or maybe just slightly smaller, just to make sure that it is tightly touching the screw. And then for the positioning, so you want to use your imagination and imagine where your cut was made, where your scion's attached, and then where you want your screw to be when it's done. So I kind of want my screw to be slightly above where the branch was cut, but angled in such a way that the head of the screw is going to be providing some force, connecting the branch to the rootstock. So again, this bottom part is rootstock, this top part is scion. And so you want, when you screw that screw in, you want the head of that screw to be pushing a little bit onto that branch, so that branch is further connected to that rootstock. You want the scion to be pulled slightly into the rootstock, so when the wind blows and the storms come and all that stuff, your precious scion doesn't get sheared off the tree. And so I'm gonna put my drill bit probably about right just above, probably about a 1/4 inch above where the imaginary branch was ended. And then I'm gonna angle it down so that the screw is gonna be drawn into the actual trunk. You can kind of imagine that. It's gonna be like inside there. And that's gonna reinforce that connection, cause minimal damage. You might slow down growth because of the damage for a little bit, but it's much better than the catastrophic damage you get when the wind comes and it tears the entire scion off. Like, that's incredibly frustrating when you go and you see like a giant tree sitting on the ground and you're like, what is that? And you realize that one of your scions got torn off. And again, you don't have to do this. Just know that you run a high risk. You run a high risk of the wind taking off your scion. So if you've had that happen, if you're watching this video because you literally just had a windstorm take one of your scions off, I feel for you. I know it sucks. This is a way that you can prevent that from happening. So if you know anyone else doing this, it's not reinforcing them. Yes, you can also do this with a nail. I prefer screws for the reasons I said earlier. A little more surface area, a little better connection. So this is where the rootstock starts, behind the scion. So I'm gonna go up a little bit into the scion. I'm gonna angle inward. And then go ahead and drill my pilot hole. Another trick, if you've never used a drill before, when you put it in, you want to pull it back out to remove that material, because if you just sit there spinning that material inside the hole, it gets really hot. And if it gets really hot, it's going to burn the wood, and we don't want to burn the wood because that's our scion, that's our living material. So we want to do the minimal amount of damage in producing our hole. Okay, so I do it until it just barely pushes up against the scion. And then, like I said, this will eventually grow around the screw. I know it's gonna freak you out to drill a hole through your precious scion. And so if you haven't lost a graft yet to wind, you probably won't wanna do this, because I heard of people putting nails and stuff through theirs and etc. And I didn't do that because I was afraid it would damage it. And then I wished I'd done something because the wind ended up taking off a few of them. So anyway, that's how I reinforce the scions. I would also wait until they're a good 5 to 10 times wider than the screw. Like the one that I have back here, that's probably not quite big enough. That one's probably about 3/4 inch wide, whereas this one's about 1.5 inches wide. So I think 1.5 inches and more should be plenty thick enough to be able to take your screw. If you're worried about it, cut your scion back to a few feet long. I wouldn't let them go more than a couple feet per year anyway. And so just cut them back hard, reinforce them so the wind doesn't take them off, and good luck doing something useful with those Bradford pears and those crabapple trees. Feel free to graft those and improve those. And this is how you keep those scions from getting wasted in the wind and getting ripped off. Thanks for joining me in the chaos. Hope that helps you.